Seminar 3 is about exercise prescription for aerobic fitness, consistent with the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines. Now, these guidelines aren't perfect, but they provide you with a foundation for prescription that you'll build on in second and third year. Now, the data we collect in exercise testing we use to assess baseline fitness levels, set training goals, and to monitor progress. We also use it to set training variables or components of the training program when we're prescribing exercise. Now, these prescription components are frequency, intensity, duration, and modality. Frequency is number of sessions or number of exercise bouts per week. Intensity is relative to some maximum value, so percent of VO2 reserve or heart rate reserve, which are very similar, percentage of heart rate max, or rating of perceived exertion. Duration is normally in minutes, and modality refers to the type of exercise. So we're talking about walking, jogging, cycling, etc. This table shows you a rough equivalency of intensities when prescribed using percent of VO2 reserve, heart rate max, or RPE. Now, VO2 reserve and heart rate reserve are measured using the maximum value, which we take away the resting value from, then we multiply it by our desired intensity, so 50% of VO2 reserve, 70% of VO2 reserve, and then we add the resting value back on. Now, this section shows you the range of values that are considered appropriate for improving aerobic fitness in healthy populations. Now, where along this spectrum from 50% of VO2 reserve up to 85% of VO2 reserve that you prescribe for your client will depend on a number of factors that we'll talk about later. This section of lower intensities for those patients and clients who are very detrained or very sedentary. So there's a lower threshold for training according to these guidelines for those people. So let's have a look at a couple of case studies. Sally's a young receptionist who wants to run in the city to surf, which is a 14-kilometre fun run. She's fairly active, so she jogs for 45 minutes twice a week at the moment at very light to fairly light intensities. There's no risk factors here. You don't have any test results either, but you know her blood pressure is normal and her BMI is normal. So Sally wants your advice for how to put together a single exercise session that she can do in her lunch hour a few times per week to improve her fitness and improve her performance in city to surf. So she's just purchased a heart rate monitor, so you can use heart rate as a means of monitoring intensity. So a single session entails a warm-up, you need an intensity and a duration, you also need a cool down. Now, the warm-up should be 5 to 10 minutes long. ACSM guidelines say 10 to 30% of heart rate reserve, but the most important part of the warm-up is going from your resting levels, heart rate, VO2, all the way up to your desired intensity for your exercise bout. So it's a gradual progression over 5 to 10 minutes. Intensity for Sally, well, RPE should be between 13 and 17. Heart rate max percentage is 71 to 94% of heart rate max. You have her max heart rate, because you have her age, so that is 136 to 180 beats per minute. It's equivalent to 50 to 85% of VO2 reserve. However, we haven't measured her VO2, so we don't know her max, so we can't use this as an exercise prescription in this case. Duration is 45 minutes. Why not longer? Why not shorter? Well, she's doing this exercise bout in her lunch break, so you can't really go much longer than 45 minutes. That's a limit based on client's availability. Cool down should also be about 5 minutes long. Now, the duration of the activity, we're talking about 45 minutes. When we prescribe duration, we're talking about at the target intensity. So this is at the RPE of 13 to 17. The duration doesn't include the warm-up and the cool down. Case study 2, John, 32-year-old sales manager, used to be a football player and wants to return to playing. Currently sedentary for a few years, has no injuries or chronic conditions. You do have a VO2 max that you've predicted using a step test, you have his blood pressure there, and you have his BMI. John wants a program that will get him fit to play football when the season starts in about 2 months. His job hours are flexible, so he has a lot of time available to him for training. Now in this case it's not a single exercise bout, so we need to prescribe a frequency. 3 to 4 days per week is consistent with the guidelines. Intensity, well the RPE is 13 to 15 or 16. Percent of heart rate max is 71 to 87%, which is 133 to 164 beats per minute in John's case. 50 to 75% of VO2 reserve. You do have his VO2 max, so 18.2 to 26.6 mils per kilo per minute. Duration of his exercise bouts should be somewhere between 20 and 60 minutes. How long each bout is going to be up to you based on what you think is appropriate. And in the exam, you're going to need to justify how many minutes are in each session, not just give us a very broad range like that, because you can't give this as an exercise prescription to a client, giving them the option of doing just 20 minutes or 60 minutes. You need to give them a more precise number. Modality for John, well, walking or jogging, because he's training for a sport which involves walking and jogging and running, so it needs to be specific to that. Warm up once again is 5 to 10 minutes and cool down is 5 minutes. Case study 3 is David. He's 40, he's a musician, he wants to lose some weight for a wedding. He's a smoker, currently sedentary, he gets sore knees when he's walking. You have a VO2 max, predicted VO2 max test value for him. You've got his blood pressure and his BMI. Now, before you write a prescription for David, you need to be aware of his current risk factor. So refer back to your notes referring to risk stratification and decide on what risk factor you think David is. David is looking to get married in 6 months and wants to look good for the big day, which means losing some weight for him. What initial program would you prescribe for David? Bearing in mind he hasn't exercised before. Well, frequency is once again 3 to 4 days per week. Intensity, now David's very sedentary, so we need to start at the lower intensities. RPE of 12 to 13, 64 to 71% of heart rate max, which you can get an exact value for, 40 to 50% of VO2 reserve, which is 13.7 to 16.2 mils per kilo per minute. Duration for David is 20 to 30 minutes a day, and it can be intermittent, so he can do 3 10-minute bouts to add up to 30 minutes in the whole day. He needs to accumulate minutes of activity here. If you refer back to your lecture notes about weight loss, Nathan would have emphasised this point. Modality for David, well, cycling might be an appropriate modality. Why? Because he gets sore knees while he's walking. Warm up once again, 5 to 10 minutes and a 5-minute cool down. Now let's consider that David's been on a program that you wrote for him for about 6 weeks now, after which time you do a retest on him. He's making good progress, his fitness is improving and his weight is coming down. Provide his program for the next 6 weeks. So how would you change the components of exercise prescription to progress David's program along? Frequency could go up here, 4 to 6 days per week. Now you increase frequency before you increase intensity. But also his intensity could progress along from the 12 to 13 level up to 13 to 15 on the RPE scale out of 20. His percent of heart rate max and therefore his percent VO2 reserve would progress, but his new VO2 reserve would be based on his new max test that he just performed, not his original one. You'd increase intensity less than 5% every 6 sessions. Duration should be 20 to 60 minutes per day. And you increase duration less than 20% per week. Modality, once again, should probably be cycling. Warm up and cool down remain the same. I recommend that you also revise your lecture notes regarding exercise prescription for aerobic fitness before the exam. A lot of the exam will be in the format of case studies, so it's a good idea to revise your case study notes and revise your lecture notes as well.